Welcome to On Emergence, a podcast on what it takes to be a human being. I'm Laura Sagan, I'm your host and a fellow human being. Today, I'm excited to have Winn Mallard with me here in Peru, in Pisac, in the Andean Mountains. Winnie, as she's known by most people, is the founder of SolSeed. Winnie, over to you to do the best introduction.
Oh, thanks, Laura. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you, and really honored to be with you all. SolSeed we call a school for spiritual ecology and esoteric development, which is kind of a very broad way of saying everything, really. A school of all things third dimensional, because you have ecology, but you have spiritual ecology, which is taking into account that ecology, the universe, nature itself as a grand being, consists of many different levels, dimensions, worlds. So you put the spiritual with the ecology. So we look through SolSeed, the school, to expand our perspective. To not just focus on ecology that is demonstrated to us through the third dimension, but to also expand our perspective out to include these other dimensions. And then esoteric development is basically to develop our awareness, our knowing. Esoteric is inner world. You have exoteric, outer world, esoteric, inner world. And it's really understanding ourselves from a deeper perspective. Our psychology, who we are, connected to the world, to the universe. There's an old saying from the Temple of Delphi in Greece that know thyself and thou shalt know the universe and its gods and goddesses, or the universe and divinity, because really the universe is within us. So esoteric development is really developing that side of ourselves. So a little school for these big things in Pisac, Peru. Here we are.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
I'm really excited. I have questions. As you know, we had to interrupt our conversation so I can start actually recording it.
Yeah.
I think one of the many questions that I have is something that you've mentioned before we started recording, is the importance around solving the problems that we currently face, but not as the people that created. It's not going to be solved in the same way as the problems that we're facing now were created. That is one question. And maybe they're kind of like also quite relevant to it is the mysticism itself, and like what's your history around it? How did you come about, like your background? Because I love learning about people's stories. So what led you to here, to Pisac, to talk and then to teach about mysticism? Because I think it's not the first mystery school that you're founding. So
great questions, Laura. So the first question, when we look at the state of the world today and we see so many problems, how do we look to solve those problems? There's a beautiful teacher named Buckminster Fuller, and he said, one cannot find a solution for a problem from the same level of consciousness that created the problem. So when we look out at the world today and we see all these really challenging, heart-wrenching, intense suffering that's going on, how are we going to change these things? And we have to change our consciousness. So then what does that mean? How do we change our consciousness? And that's what SolSeed is here to help us do. And that's the spiritual ecology and esoteric development together to help us shift our perspective, our awareness, because we can't be looking at the same thing the same way to shift it. We have to look at things differently. And part of that comes from my walk in life as I moved from one level of understanding or perspective or awareness to another one, and the things that helped me do that. And Yeah, I don't. Do you want me to like just go through my life, my spiritual life history, right quick, or?
I would love that. And I think our listeners and viewers also would love that. Learning the
Okay.
origin is also maybe someone is on a similar path and maybe they can also derive the lessons from your path as well. So yes.
Okay. All right. Let's think on this then. I was born in 1965 in Atlanta, Georgia. And my father was a theologian. So I came into a situation with a great deal of spirituality and religious foundation. And my mom was also very religious in that she created a kindergarten in the church where my parents and me and my brothers went. As I left the church at a younger age, I'm 16, I guess, because I didn't resonate with the church. So then I went into the world of rock and roll for a while. I saw Led Zeppelin when I was 14 in Brussels, Belgium, and that might have been my first like real spiritual awakening. So then I went into this rock and roll world and really enjoyed that for a while, and then started realizing the conversations I was having at the bars just started to become very stale. And I realized, no, I need something else in my life. I left that world, moved to a little town called Athens, Georgia, and started working in a natural foods co-op, started pursuing a different kind of spiritual tradition. And I was like, what felt comfortable and what was available in that time was called deep ecology. So really started moving into the natural world and connecting into nature, which I'd always done as a child, always with my dog friend in the woods, hanging out. It had always been my place of solace and comfort and renewal. So I moved to a place called Earth Song, which was an eco-spiritual retreat center, got all into that realm, which kind of led me into understanding the divine feminine in a different way and looking to have a sense of how the goddess fits into everything. So I started women's circles. That was beautiful. And started a school called the Divine Feminine Mystery School. So that was a short stint. Then that led me into esoteric Christianity. I did esoteric Christianity at Sancta Sophia Seminary, a seminary founded in basically what is now, I would say, my path is gnosis, which just is the Greek word for wisdom or knowledge through direct experience, not through belief. So through really directly connecting with divinity or the other realms and learning and gaining your wisdom from that, not from reading books, but from practicing. So it's a practical spiritual path. It includes reading books to learn how to do it. I kind of went from rock and roll into the ecological thing, and permaculture changed my life. During the ecological thing, I found permaculture. It was huge. I moved to a place called Earth Haven Eco Village and lived in this eco village setting and studied permaculture. And that was giant for me because it just really shifted my awareness, my perspective. Each thing did. Each path I checked out, each world I walked into added to just expanding my perspective. And then the most potent permaculture just was like for moving from dominator perspective, because we've lived in this dominator culture for thousands of years where it's all about dominating nature, dominating the other country, dominating each other, to permaculture teaches cooperation, teaches how to be in a system where everything is working together and supporting each other. And, it's how a really good ecosystem that hasn't been adulterated works. And so permaculture was huge. And then I found ayahuasca at the eco village and then decided to come to Peru. And being here, I've been here 14 years, and this has been gigantic for me. And I decided to come to work with ayahuasca with my teacher's teacher, who is down here. I was in ayahuasca retreat for a while, and then I decided to travel. I figured I had about enough money for like 3 months to travel around Peru and check things out. And a friend had been in Cusco and said, Cusco's great, go to Cusco. And I was a little overwhelmed because I'd been in dieta for a long time, working with ayahuasca, like no coffee, no sugar, no. And all of a sudden I'm in Cusco, which is just like the city of temptation, you know, all this yummy food and chocolate and coffee. And I was like, wow, this is just too much. And everywhere I looked, I saw this little word popping out from posters and pamphlets that was like, Ollantaytambo. What is this place? It just kept finding me. And I was like, okay, I'm supposed to go to Ollantaytambo. So I went to Ollantaytambo, and I didn't leave for 2.5 years. And I opened a bed and breakfast and married a local man and stayed there for 7 years. I really never thought I would live outside the United States. I'd never thought about it. I never planned it. And wow, it was a doozy of a spiritual school and path. I've learned so much from these beautiful people and this amazing culture that is here. And it's a mystical culture. So it's coming from the United States, which is a very materialistic culture, and landing here, which the foundation is still mystical. It's becoming more and more materialistic. The 14 years I've been here, I've watched great changes moving in that direction. And still the foundation is very mystical. The people here for thousands and thousands of years have believed in the Apus, the mountain spirits. They talk to them. They work with them. Pachamama, the earth. You know, Wiracocha is the great spirit. They just connect in more to the unseen world. And that's what I would say is like the definition of mysticism, or the definition of a mystic is a person whose perspective, whose awareness includes the other worlds, the unseen worlds, as much as this third dimensional world. So all of these different paths, these steps led me to this place of like, okay, you know, that's what was missing for me going through the normal education system of Atlanta, Georgia, 1970s and 80s. That's what was missing for me. Then going to Emory University. I studied cultural anthropology there, which I love, and it is amazing. And there's nowhere out there that I found until I started stepping into these other paths that really help guide us in understanding what it is to be a mystic and what it is to have mystical inclinations. And I feel like there's a lot of people out there who have these inclinations, have these urges, these yearnings, these nudges to have this broader perspective that includes the unseen world. And when I landed in Peru in this little village and started dating a local man, I was just like, wow, okay, this is what a mystical culture feels like. And the foundation of that culture, the things we need to nurture within ourselves to nurture that inclination, the mystical inclination, are things such as humility, generosity, altruism, which is thinking of the whole before the self, you know, thinking of the other before the self. All these things that I found in this with these people, all of a sudden I was living with these people and I was like, wow, it's not just that they're psychic. I mean, my ex-husband, he always had this sense of what I was thinking, you know, and a lot of the people there, if you sink in deep with them, they don't need to use a lot of words to communicate. There's a lot of just communication that happens, a lot of just allowance to magic happening. I come from one of the most prideful, arrogant cultures that can be, and it blocks our mystical abilities completely. Pride doesn't serve us in terms of this path. In the materialistic world, pride's looked at as a good thing. Actually, from a spiritual perspective, it kills us spiritually. And so all of a sudden I'm hanging out with these beautiful people that are so humble, just like the soil, this beautiful, rich soil that they work with, with their big bowls, and they're out plowing like they were 10,000 years ago. I don't know, this blade that goes through the soil, and the big cows take it, and then they throw in the seeds, and just watching this beautiful, and how gentle they were, very few opinions. Like, they're just kind of like, it's up to the mystery. We don't know. Whereas the culture I came from, so scientifically driven, like, we know it all. We've got it figured out. Guess what? We don't. And then that's the way you totally squash mystical possibility, mystical growth, is by thinking you have it figured out, by not giving kudos to the mystery, by not being humble enough to be like, I don't have a clue, actually. So yeah, does that answer your question?
It does.
That was a ramble.
And it answers the question. It wasn't a ramble, it was a story. And there are lots of things that can flourish from that story. My question is, what has led you to set up SolSeed right now in a different town and but because it's in the same valley? And what is it that you're hoping to bring into the world with SolSeed as the school that you're founding? And by the way, if you are in Pisac and if you stumble upon SolSeed as a cafe, go there. The food is amazing.
Yay. Thank you, Laura. Yeah, come visit for sure if you're in Pisac, Peru. I had a really heartbreak in my life coming up 5 years ago, I guess, where my brother took his life. And he, to me, was very much one of these people that came in with more mystical inclinations, didn't know how to work with them, didn't know how to use them or moderate them, so they didn't make him feel scared and uncomfortable. I saw that for him and for me. Like, I knew the mainstream culture had not given him what he needed. He was super bright, super creative, really just an amazing person, that somehow the mainstream world that he found himself in, that we all find ourselves in, I should just say materialistic world instead of mainstream, because there's so many levels to it, but materialistic education, materialistic values, what's important, making money, having the family, doing all this stuff, where the spiritual, mystical stuff is very undervalued and very hardly looked at, really. There's religion, and religion doesn't even hold that for us. I had the sense of like, he needed a different kind of something to help him along, a different kind of education, a different kind of schooling, a different kind of reflection, a different kind of support. And well, me too. And so many people out there. One day I was living in Cusco at the time, and I thought, okay, I'm going to create some kind of school or center, or I was thinking Ascension Center, I was like, no, that's cheesy. And all of a sudden, SolSeed just came through. At that time, it was School of Ecological and Esoteric Design, but then now we've changed it to the Spiritual Ecology and Esoteric Development. Normally, I'm the kind of person that comes up with ideas and rarely moves on them and just throws them out into the universe, and like, maybe somebody will pick up that idea and make it happen, And then here comes my friend Jordy, who is this young man from the Netherlands, who you should look up when you're there. And he had this sort of workshop thing that he was doing about purposeful prosperity, making your dreams come true. And I just liked him, and I was like, oh, I'll do his workshop. I did his workshop, and I liked it, and it was good. And then he's like, I've got this online course that's for 3 months. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure. Yeah. And by the end of it, he and I were doing SolSeed together. So really, he was the fire, the initiator to take it out of the realm of this little idea that was floating around into making it happen. And we thought we were just going to get the office in Pisac. I got a little office, rented a little office, and I wanted to eventually hang out in Manu, which is this beautiful eco reserve, national park, amazing place. And I thought, well, we'll make the school over there, but I'll have an office in Pisac. So you have to have a presence here. And then I got slapped around like this thing where we think we know what something is supposed to be in our creative process of creating something, but really there's other forces at work, especially when it's a mystery school, that decide what it's gonna be. So the first 4 or 5 months, I really got slapped by the angels, the higher beings that like, no, it's not what you think it's gonna be. It's gonna be a little bit different. And I had to surrender and let go and be like, okay, I will hold the container and I will feed the baby, but I have to let the baby grow into what it wants to be. So then all of a sudden the space up the street comes available that's got a cafe and a garden and this classroom space. I'm like, okay, I guess this is what SolSeed wants to be. And then I took on some other partners because Jordy left and went back to Holland. And so these other beautiful couple, Cheyenne and Ruben, came on board. And the three of us started this thing. So we're working on that immersion program, a residency. We found a place that might work out as kind of the SolSeed hospedaje or hostel, a space where people live, and then you just come here and we create a curriculum and experience, a SolSeed experience for 3 months to really help create this broadening of the perspective, connecting esoteric developments, so connecting to our inner authority. One of our slogans is, our only authority is inner authority, creating a blueprint for what a mystery school can look like for these times. Something that can be reproduced in other places is kind of the idea. So that's the SolSeed story so far. We'll see, what the higher ups want.
Well, actually, that brings me to another question that I think I really hope that some of our audience is pondering on is the creativity.
Yeah.
And the role of mysticism in creativity, because I know that within myself that when I feel more connected to myself, to my soul, to what I consider a soul, the inner knowing and intuition I create, it's not like there is no self-doubt, but the self-doubt voice isn't very loud or not loud enough to stop me. So my question is, what is the role of mysticism in your creative process? How do you connect with it? How do you nurture it? Maybe you have some advice as well for people who are maybe have that kind of spark that they're like, I really want to create, because I think inherently human beings are creators. We're here to create, to bring, to improve, to make the world better through creation, through bringing our unique gifts, unique talents. But it's also so scary, a very scary process. How do you support yourself through it?
Yeah. Wow, there's so much right there to unpack. Well, number one of the things that has been really important for me in my creative process is working hard to shift from what materialistic education really teaches us through imitation and memorization. Most of how we have even created is through imitation and memorization. That's materialistic education. Mystical education, how you want to learn, create, understand, is through inspiration, which is direct connect. It's divinity. Einstein said, imagination's way more important than knowledge. So you have intuition, imagination, and inspiration as the tools, as the energies, as the things that motivate us and determine our creation. When the creative force, the creative energy is coming out of those the three eyes, as opposed to looking around and imitating what others are doing or memorizing how to do something and then just reproducing it. It's way different. It's a way different experience. And so the level of fear is just kind of disappears. It's still there to a degree, I think. Like, I was scared shitless starting SolSeed, I told you earlier. But I just had this yearning inside of me, like, This is just, I just have to feel the fear and do it anyway. I just have to feel the fear and do it anyway. I just have to do it. Like you were saying, your tool is just, if you feel it and it's scary, that's what you have to do. I feel like that's the wisdom when it comes to fear. Like, this is what has to happen, you know? And my tools are meditation and prayer, connecting in, talking to friends, being surrounded by positive people, looking to uplift themselves as well, other creatives who don't worry so much. The reason why the people here in Peru have this more mystical connection and perspective is they don't define themselves with money or material goods. Like, you'll find people living in these super simple casas, dirt floor, wood-fired little mud oven, their animals, very, very simple, rustic, and they'll have a lot of money. But they like living how they're living. So, like, that level of learning how to be okay with not having the image. See, it's pride. A lot of it's pride. Because in materialistic culture, we're told you are of value if you have done this by this certain age, if you've made this much money, if you've got this kind of material possessions. And that's what keeps us in this box and really kills creativity. It's as much not like fear of survival, because we all know we're going to survive. Very few of us are going to end up starving on the street. We can go there in our mind, but really most of it is our self-image, our pride that, oh, how people will look at me in my culture, my peers, my family, if I'm living super simply and not making the big splash that materialism says that's success. I want to be successful. I want to feel successful. And this is the definition I've been shown as to what that is. So there's a place where we have to like let go of that to step into true creativity. And that's what you're talking about, what it takes to just jump, take that leap of faith into a different kind of life. Most people on the planet are probably a little bit like, oh, I feel a little stagnant. I'm not being very creative. I'm doing this 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. What is it getting me? Okay, it's getting me security, but like, what does that really do for me? And one of the main questions that is the big white elephant sitting in the room that we often just like, is what is our true purpose? Why are we human being on planet Earth? What is the point of this existence? Why are we here? Why are we doing what we're doing? And that's inside of all of us at some level. It might be buried on a subconscious level, but there's a place where that is in all of us, because that is a part of the essential nature of coming into this realm, coming and being Laura, sitting in Pisac, Peru in this moment, interviewing Winnie and doing this whole thing we're doing. It's like, what's the point? Why are we here? And that is the eternal question. And that is what really we want to work on as whatever path we take. We want to have a sense of that. What does it take to be a human being? You know, why am I here? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And there's answers. There's really great answers. And you come to SolSeed Immersion Program and you will get them.
That's a nice hook. In what you said, you mentioned the word materialism quite a few times, and also the pride in our possessions and what we have, and showing others that what we have. I think I wonder, where it is all coming from? Like, why this need for material possessions in certain cultures, like the kind of so-called Western civilization, that isn't as pronounced here in the cultures where they're closer to nature, closer to land, closer to something more than our material existence. So I think as a person who likes to understand the origin of stories, if I am to know where that materialistic view comes from, it helped me navigate it a little bit better, kind of like get a shortcut and cheat code into like, this is just me, materialistic self that comes from wherever it comes from. Where do you think that that's coming from, that pride and need for material possessions?
That's a great question, Laura. I feel like part of it is the result of the absence of true spiritual fulfillment. Like I'll say to the people here, when people here will ask me where I'm from, and I tell them I'm from the United States, and they're like, oh, wow, and I'm like, yeah, but actually there's a lot of people who are really troubled, and a lot of medication is being served up because of psychological issues. And because what my sense is we have become a culture that we don't know how to fulfill ourselves, truly fulfill ourselves from a spiritual, mystical place. So then we look to fulfill ourselves from materialism, from gathering stuff, from making money, from pretty body, fancy clothes, all the things, careers, all of the things that we think are going to fulfill us, because there's a void there and we haven't been shown how to fill the void, truly fill it through spiritual work. So I think part of it's that. I think part of it is just who this humanity was supposed to become. Part of the mystical teachings is we come down through the different dimensions and through the different realms, and we land here in the third dimension. In the Kabbalah, it's called Malkuth. It's the last Sephirah of the Kabbalah. And so we're supposed to be super materialistic right now. But it's also supposed to be something that we land and we hit there, and then we start going back up. And then, so right now we're being asked, so it's all okay. It's how it's supposed to be, except now we're realizing, this is kind of a dead end, this materialistic thing. You can only satisfy yourself so much from materialism. And now we're being asked to move back up into the more mystical realms. So I feel like that's part of it. I feel like how science has come about and emerged as this thing that we almost worship now in sort of modern cultures or materialistic cultures. And it's a materialistic science. It's founded in the five senses, observing things through the five senses. Whereas divine science or mystical science, you go through the interior senses, our inner world, our inner faculties that are right now in every human on the planet, but in dormancy. They're lying dormant. So this science that is informing us as to how the world works and the things we are to be afraid of, the things we are to crave and desire, I mean, almost every level is just completely focused on this very small part of the world that is this material part of things and coming through our five senses. And that's just very, very narrow in how it presents itself and how it informs us. We've been basically programmed, all of our systems, our education system, our medical system, our political system, our agriculture system, like all the systems have programmed us into being enamored by this materialistic perspective. And the way we start recognizing that is, oh, okay, right now I'm realizing my money's a little short. Let me think about how that makes me feel right now. And let me look at what aspect of myself is feeling that. Okay, I'm feeling like a loser. I'm feeling really lame. I'm 58 years old. I should have more money. I should have things together by now on the materialistic realm. And so my pride is wounded. I go into that and I allow myself to feel that. And I'm like, okay, this is my pride that's feeling scared and wounded. But let me just realize that my pride is not who I truly am. So part of the whole process is moving us into a place of really understanding who are we. And see, that's where you have to go into the mystical realm to get those answers. And part of it is just surrounding yourself with people that support you in that. My ex-husband, when I first met him, he had no money. I mean, tons of Peruvians live hand to mouth. They make enough money that day to feed themselves, and then they go out the next day to make more money to feed themselves. They don't have savings. And he was that way when I met him. He had 2 soles in his pocket. And I'm like, is that all the money you have? He's like, yeah, but I have a tab at this restaurant around the corner. And my mom cooks. And, and I was like, wow. And you feel fine about that? And he's like, why would I not feel fine about it? Of course I'm fine about it. What does that matter? And just really seeing because his whole community, number one, it's part of it is living in community. He's got community. They will hold him. They will take care of him. It's not like you're ever going to just be stranded out there by yourself with 2 soles, though that could happen. But for the most part, I feel like, the importance of community comes up. And we've been so isolated in materialistic cultures. Part of what that has been is also just going into the nuclear family unit and then just individuation. So that's part of the material world too, is just everything is individualized. Somehow through this materialistic perspective, we've got this sense that we are not connected to everything. Whereas when you get it more and more in the mystical perspective, you're like, oh my God, we're connected. Everything is connected. How could I ever think of myself as independent from anything else? And so the people here, just because they've had that level of culture, they have a deeper sense of that. And then they also value community more than individuation. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Good.
It does. And it brings me to another one.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I have a lot of questions.
Great.
And that comes from a personal experience as well. When you start realizing that there's more that you can't quite sense, but you feel that what you have, there must be something, you've gone on holidays that are luxurious, or you just go, you travel around the world, you consume things, you buy things, you possess things, and eventually you kind of start feeling like there may be something more. And when you do step on the path of more spirituality, mysticism, asking questions that you don't know the answers to, really don't know, and the fact of that you feel that these are important questions, like who am I, what am I here for, there is a sense of discomfort of when one looks at the spiritual path, at the mystical path, pursuing it in some ways, how do you deal with that discomfort that comes maybe it's wrong, maybe it doesn't have it, maybe I'll go back to my materialistic path, and even though you kind of know that you can't because you see that it doesn't work. So to shorten my question is how one can deal with a sense of almost distrust, is it actually going to work? Is meditation every day really going to work? Is journaling really going to work? Is adopting some sort of prayer practice, whoever you worship as your god or gods or goddesses, how would you, from your perspective, would you recommend to kind of stepping over that discomfort, that fear, that you don't know that that is actually your kind of almost ascending or evolving or emerging, that it's not just words and people and rituals that don't matter anything?
Yeah. I would say...
And have you had that experience yourself, actually? This kind of is it really it? Or am I supposed to pursue it? Oh, am I failing? Am I really should be following what society tells me to do? Maybe I should just try harder. Maybe I should be working hard towards that direction. Whereas you really feel that direction doesn't really have as much substance as that other one that's filled with mystery.
Yeah. I feel like personally, somehow I kind of came in with this yearning, like this inner, there's got to be something more kind of need to investigate and explore. And you look at my astrology and stuff, it's there. I feel like for other people that might not have come in with that, because if you have that, you just can't deny it. It's just this thing inside that's just like, I do. Yeah, I think you have it too. But then of course I bounced from one thing to the other thing to figure it out, and maybe I'll bounce some more. I feel pretty solid in the path I'm on right now, which is Gnosis, that I found here in Peru. That's a Latin American spiritual mystical path that I love, love, love. So I feel like that's sort of where I'm going to stay the rest of my days. And I feel like I had to check out all these other things first to get me there. The whole time just being guided by this yearning. There's got to be more to it than the 9 to 5 and things. And I mean, I didn't have children. I never had a career. Like, I definitely just came in with a different path, So that's me. For friends of mine who kind of did the normal thing, like got the career, be it corporate or whatever, and then had kids, had the family, and then all of a sudden reached this time, like usually you go through your Uranus opposition, which is like 38 to 42, which is Uranus is opposite from where it was when we're born, and it's a big pivot for a lot of people. Midlife crisis is what it's called.
48 to 52.
Okay. 38 to 42.
38 to 42.
Yeah, 38 to
Ooh,
42. Yeah. That's your Uranus opposition. And that's a time where the stars are aligned, the planets are aligned, just to ask us to reanalyze what we're doing with our lives. The big questions come up. Why am I here? What's the point of this life? So a lot of people go through that and then all of a sudden start really looking for spiritual path and spiritual work. And I feel like some of those people I've met or been friends with, they've had to bounce back and forth, quit the corporate world, quit, this whole thing, go to India, join an ashram, but then, is that boring? But then go back to the corporate world or at some point, like there's no mistakes in what it is. And if it's like too scary to completely leave what has been familiar, it's just take baby steps and read the teachings of the masters is what I most recommend. The teachings that have been left to us within the Bible from Moses and Jesus, within Buddhism, what Buddha was teaching, what the Buddha was teaching, what Krishna was teaching in the Hindu tradition. Like, go to the masters, walk in the footsteps of the ones who got there. They got to these places, to this level of self-realization, knowing who you truly are as a human being, what it truly is to be a human being. They got there and they tell us about it and they share with us how they got there. And the whole point is they're sharing it so that we can follow, so that we can get there too. So I feel like that's really important. I feel like especially with the New Age movement, there's lots of confusion out there. So I feel like one of the things that has helped me the most is really sticking to the teachings of true masters and just doing our best to follow along and know that patience and willpower is the name of the game. You can't be attached to an end goal. You can't be like, oh, I've got to reach self-realization this lifetime. That's your pride. You don't want that driving you. You want to be able to be like, okay, this is just what I am here to do, This is why I'm a human being on planet Earth right now, is to work on this. And a great deal of patience. Coming from materialistic culture, we've got a great deal of impatience. So one of the things about the people here in this culture and a lot of mystical cultures, you'll encounter very patient people. They're so patient. And so I feel like we have to cultivate these things like patience, as I've said before, generosity, kindness, altruism. And as we cultivate these things, we look at, oh, wow, I'm suffering less now than I was before. So really the motivation needs to be, I'm tired of suffering. I'm really tired of suffering, and I'm tired of seeing those around me suffering. It really, my heart hurts. I'm ready to shift myself so that then I won't add, because when we're suffering, we're causing suffering to those around us. And when we really look at that, it's like, oh my God, this breaks my heart. My suffering is going out and causing others suffering, and I don't want to do that anymore. And so then that helps motivate us. So I feel like that's one of the main things we got to set our scope on is I don't want to suffer anymore, and I don't want to cause that for others. And then the patience comes, the commitment comes at some level.
Thank you for very applicable advice. You mentioned a very, I guess, something that is like a reminder for myself that go back to the masters. For me, I take great comfort in Bhagavad Gita, so in the Vedantic school of thought. Kind of it reminds me of what am I here for, what is worth worrying, that actually nothing is worth worrying, and then what is the path. But from your perspective, we talked about it, your masters, and who is it that you consider as your master, and maybe some recommendation as well that might some people who have heard and who can resonate with your words the most, that maybe you can recommend some reading and further research, because I will put them in the show notes.
Well, my greatest teaching tool learning is a school that's an online school located in the United States. It's called Glorian.org, GLORIAN.org. And they are founded in the teachings of the Master Samael on Weor, who is a Latin American master. He was around, he first published 1950, his first book, and then died in the mid-70s from Colombia. And then he lived in Mexico City because he had to flee Colombia because they wanted to kill him, because he was bringing the mystical teachings out to the open. So basically what his take is that every ascended master or major founder of the religions that had great influence on this humanity were teaching the same thing. That is what one can call the science of consciousness or the divine science. Basically, the science that is used to create the universe. Really kind of came before God or divinity, this science. It's like laws, numbers. Every tradition is founded in these teachings. And be it ancient Egypt, Inca, Maya, Aztec, all the enlightened cultures were founded in this science of consciousness. All the teachers, Jesus, Moses, Buddha, Krishna, Muhammad, Joan of Arc, all major influential masters were working with the science of consciousness. It teaches us how to elevate the divinity within us in the materialistic world. So coming down into this realm of 3D, but bringing with us the divine spark. That's our divine spark. Here in Peru or in South America, it's Chispa Divina. Okay, we all have Chispa Divina within us, the divine spark, and how to grow that divine spark so that then we are walking in this third dimensional world as divinity, basically, which is what all these masters attained. So Master Samael came along in the 1950s, and he was like, look, they call him a master of synthesis because he's like, look, Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, it's all the same. It all comes from the same thing. It's all and that's the beauty of the mystical teachings, because there's no division. You can't have my religion's better than your religion when you go to the foundation, which is the mystical teachings. So I love Master Samael. He spoke to a Latin American audience, so it can be challenging for Westerners to read. He's not an intellectual writer. It doesn't, like, you might compare him to Rudolf Steiner or Blavatsky from these other mystical teachers from the last 100, however many years now it is. But his writing is much more geared towards Latin American culture and who the people were. But he changed Latin America. He radically changed it. But it's all on the underground because the Catholic Church is so influential here. And they tried to kill him, throw him in jail, because the Catholic Church doesn't want the mystery taught, doesn't want the science of consciousness taught for whatever reason. There's we can go into that. That's, who cares? Who cares? But I mean, when I entered into this path, I was in Cusco, and I went to have some magnet therapy done at this little holistic clinic in Cusco, and it was a man from Peru, and he was talking to me, and so I worked with him for a number of weeks, and then he's like, by the way, you might enjoy this meditation class that I know about. And I was like, oh, okay. And I went, and it was Gnosis, is what they call it. Samael created in Latin America is this network of what he calls lumicials, is like the temples of people that are practicing the work of the mystery schools. They're basically mystery schools, and from all different traditions, because he brings them all together. It's esoteric Christian, it's Kabbalah from the Jewish tradition, it's Buddhism, it's Inca, Maya, Aztec. So he brings it all together, but they're like, don't tell your neighbors. And I'm like, don't tell my neighbors, and they're like, yeah, we got to keep it quiet, because a Catholic person would see that as demonic or sacrilege, that people would be practicing the same thing Jesus practiced. We would be saying, no, Jesus was a son of God, and what he was teaching was that we all are here to do that work. Now, not many of us are going to get to the level that Jesus got to. Like, that's extraordinary, very rare that a person attains that. So yeah, very special. And over and over and over in the Gospels, Jesus is saying, this you will do, you can do, and more. And so the idea being, what Master Samael brought was this whole other idea of, come on, like, here's the teachings, and it doesn't matter what religion you come from. It complements all the religions because it's the foundation of all the religions. So I love him, and that's my main teacher right now. I am definitely suffering way less than I was before I found this path.
That's the greatest recommendation for a book or a teaching.
Yeah.
I suffer less.
I suffer
Not
less.
that I don't suffer it, because I think if you're to say I don't suffer it all, is like, that's bullshit. Of course, everybody suffers.
Hopefully, I mean, that's where Jesus got to.
That's true.
I mean, he suffered.
Ultimately, but then he didn't.
But the idea is that once we attain self-realization, we rid ourselves of the psychological aggregates or the psychological defects that cause us suffering, which you can also see as the 7 deadly sins: pride, lust, greed, gluttony, envy, laziness, all these, like, and people are like, oh, the sins, it's like, yeah, I mean, but they're written about in every tradition. That's just the Christian terminology for it. But in Buddhism, it's psychological aggregates. Yeah. And it's these nasty little things up here that get us. And what we want to do on the path is lower. I call them orcs. I see them as orcs from the Hobbit movies.
Yeah.
You know, those nasty, like they're just like up there, and and basically we have our chispa divina. We have this spark of divinity within us. We have to have it. Everybody has it, but it's encaged by orcs. It's encaged by these psychological aggregates. So what Jesus did, what Buddha did, what Krishna did was lower the psychological aggregates and raise the chispa divina, raise the divinity, innermost beingness, whatever you want to call it. And that's what they were teaching. So that's the work.
How do you deal with your orcs when you're faced with them?
Well, number one is, constant self-observation. So that's Gnosis 101, is watching my thoughts, my feelings, my motor instinctive sexual impulses. Okay, so we have 3 brains. And the third one is partly back here too. It's part of our nervous system, right? Motor instinctive sexual. And then our intellectual and our emotional brains. So who's controlling these brains? So when a thought comes up, when I'm on it, which isn't all the time at all, when I'm really on it, I'm like, oh, is this the God in me thinking this thought, or is this an orc? You know? And I'm like, oh, that's my envy. That's my envy thinking that thought right now. And then there's a practice they call muerta en marchar, which is just like marching death. So as soon as you see that orc, you just imagine, or I imagine, like I have little images in my mind for what my envy looks like. And it's this little nasty guy with pointy ears and green head. And I just imagine chopping his head off. And that's Kali. That's this beautiful goddess imagery we have.
I love the image of
We
Kali.
love Kali.
One of my favorite
We
images.
love
yes.
some Kali. And who's the skeletons around her? It's the orcs. It's our psychological aggregates. That's the spiritual warrior. That's being a true spiritual warrior. You're not fighting outside. You're fighting the stuff inside. And that's what all the masters did first and foremost. Because you have to, then I get a feeling, I'm feeling sad right now. Oh, what's making me feel sad and anxious right now? Oh, that's my pride. I feel left out. I feel not acknowledged. Oh,
That is a very interesting
that's
insight.
my pride. Okay. So then I have this image of pride that I see, and I like close my eyes. And then, so that's the marching death. But then the ultimate how we deal with them is we work with them in meditation. So we want to put them in our heart. We want to comprehend them, not understand, but comprehend them. Like truly, okay, all right, pride, who are you? Where did you come from? Let me just feel you. Let me just feel you. And then slowly, as we start comprehending more and more and just becoming more and more aware, we are able to eliminate them. And I don't know, you can edit this if it's too much, but I'll go into it for you anyway. If it's too much for y'all, I'm sorry. But then the main thing that Master Samael brought to the world as what his mission was to be here was the importance of sacred sexuality to attain enlightenment or self-realization. And his idea is that every enlightened ascended master has had a spouse who they work together. Because basically you have your mother Kundalini is the most powerful force, most powerful force almost in the universe, really. Like, what's more powerful than this creative energy? Is sexual energy. What is sexual energy? It's what creates the universe. It's what creates everything. And we have that in us, right? She's our mother Kundalini. You might want to say Mother Devi. So what are we doing with her, right? We are using our sexual energy, this incredible divine presence that is within us, for momentary spasmodic pleasure, this what we call the orgasm. And we have been told and convinced ourselves that that's what we're supposed to use our sexual energy for, is this pleasure. And that actually, I've even been told that's how you are healthy. That's how you stay healthy. You're supposed to have orgasm. Well, Master Samael was, his first book, 1950 in Colombia, was called The Perfect Matrimony: Why You Cannot Separate Sex and Religion. And basically, he brought the teachings, the esoteric teachings, super, like the great arcanum. It's the fountain of youth. It's the philosopher's stone. It's been there, present in all the teachings, but hidden in symbolism. And he was the first one to bring it out and be like, here's what the symbolism means. Mm-hmm. Jesus sitting at the well, the woman comes to the well, and she's like, you want water, living water, so you will never thirst? She's like, yes, master. And he's like, go get your husband. And she's like, well, I have multiple husbands, or he's like, oh, then you can't do it. Because what it is our whole nervous system is built for transmuting our sexual energy. We have the Ida and Pingala. In esoteric Christianity, it's called Adam and Eve. These two energy channels that go like this up our spinal cord, like the staff, all the masters holding the staff, everything is symbolizing this secret. And our mother Kundalini is coiled up at the base of our tailbone. And the whole work of gnosis or self-realization is you slowly bring that energy up through the Ida and Pingala to where then she connects to our father, who is our pineal gland. And that's how you attain true enlightenment. So basically, Samael was the first one to be like, if there's a master out there, I assure you, if it's a male, he had his wife priestess that was doing the work with him to attain this mastery. If it's a woman, she had her husband priest. That's the way that it happens. And that's the whole way our energetic system is set up. Our whole nervous system, everything is just set up for that. But right now, with humanity where it's at, that we're using sex for orgasm, we're using our just most precious divine mother goddess energy just for this momentary I mean, once you get it, it's just ridiculous. It's like, oh my God. It took me a while. At first I was like, whatever. Orgasm's good. It's like, come on. And then after a while of like just being with it and meditating on it and sitting with it and playing with it, like in terms of like and reading about it. And then, what Glorian.org and Samael teach you is how to read the master's teachings, how to read the New Testament, Jesus' teachings, to where you understand the symbolism. Okay, so every sacred text has levels of understanding. That's what makes it a sacred text. So a person that's reading just the purely materialistic, like they're reading a newspaper, read historical accounts. If it's a sacred text, it's teaching you the teachings, the esoteric teachings, the mystical teachings, the secret teachings of the ages. And so you start learning to shift your perspective to understand the true teachings that are happening here, the deeper levels of teachings. And it's all about sex. And I was just like, oh my God. So I joined this La Misial in Cusco. I'm the only gringa. I'm the only foreigner. It's all Peruvians. And they're all very straight-laced. None of this plant medicine or shamanic stuff. They're all like lawyers, architects. There's some campesinos that are drawn to it too, the country folk that live here. But here I am in this circle of these beautiful people. And I'm not supposed to tell what really goes on. And it's all, but basically we're doing work that is totally founded in sacred sexuality, or you can call it white tantra. It's the true tantra. Now Tantra's come out with lots of confusion around it. But the true tantric teachings were this as well. Every tradition, once you start understanding the teachings and understanding the symbolism, is talking about sacred sexuality. So it being the philosopher's stone, the cornerstone of the temple. Like without it, we're going to have a hard time getting very far on the path. Now, you can do a lot as a single person. I'm single. I don't have a partner. So there's a lot that single people can do, and we can get to a great level, especially compared to what's out there right now, you know? And to attain mastery, that's what Gnosis teaches.
So does it mean that you have to have a partner in a way, like the partner that understands, that are kind of on the same level of wanting to create something bigger than themselves?
Yeah.
But no.
Well, yes and no. Yes and no. Like I said, yes and no. You can have, like, we can do our own work. Like if I stay single the rest of my life, I can do plenty of work this lifetime on my own, just with what I'm talking about. Really looking at my psychological aggregates, my defects, really working on them, really changing who I am, lowering my suffering, lowering the suffering I'm causing others. Tons and tons to do. Mostly you'll find people that have attained these high levels, like the masters we study, they've been doing, it's been lifetimes of work to get to where they got to. This isn't a one lifetime job, you know? Now, right now, because we're in this very special time in human history that I don't know if we want to go into because that might be too much for, but we are getting extra credit for the work we do, basically. Like divinity is filled with mercy and justice, you know? So they see us doing this very intense work in the hardest time. We're in the Kali Yuga. It's the last sliver of the Iron Age for this humanity, okay? The darkness is everywhere. It's black magic everywhere. It's manipulation, coercion. That's black magic, all right? When you're feeling manipulated, that's black magic. When you're feeling coerced to do something, that's black magic, all right? And that's what's happening this world over right now. So basically, when we are doing this kind of work we're doing, the divinity is like, wow, look at those kids down there. They are doing good considering, look at the muck they're standing in. You know, it's mucky down there. And wow, Winnie's doing pretty good. You know, she's got a long way to go. She's doing pretty good considering, and we'll give her a little extra credit. We'll give her a little extra boost, you know. So that's what we can count on right now. And the work we want to do right now is to really think about how we want to see who we want humanity to be as a whole. You know, beyond ourselves. Because, yeah, the work we do is on ourselves, but we're doing it for the whole. So then it's like, okay, do we want humanity to stay in this mucky muck? I mean, that pedophilia exists, that human trafficking is something that actually is happening. You know, like, what is that? That is just absolute failure, kids. This we do not, like, this is not something, and that's in me. If it's in humanity, it's in all of us, you know? Like, that's not just, them and us. We don't do that anymore. The mystical teachings show you can't do them and us. It's not some evil aliens have come in and infiltrated and causing that. No, that's just us. That's just who this humanity is right now. And it's because of our psychological aggregates. Okay? It's because of lust. It's because of greed. It's because of envy. These are the things that are driving this humanity. It drives my 3 brains. It drives the 3 brains of every person on the planet are these orcs. They've taken over. All right? So what we got to do is we got to kill the orcs within ourselves. And then we want to see a humanity that doesn't have these orcs controlling us. That who's controlling us then? God, divinity.
Ourselves as well.
Well, the divinity within us. See, that's the thing. When we say ourselves, what aspect? Because the orcs are yourself too.
I think I mean ourselves from the capital O.
Yeah.
Or capital S in between the ourselves.
Yes.
The self. But you gotta know what you have to have. You
Right
need to
now.
have the practice to understand the difference.
Yeah, because we're like, oh, I channeled this thing and that was my God self speaking. And it's like, maybe. But all these orcs, they're tricky. They're smart. They're not like, maybe we shouldn't call them orcs because they look kind of stupid in the movies, right? These are very smart, sophisticated little nasties. And we are so oblivious. Our awareness of what's happening in our consciousness is like the tip of an iceberg, okay? Like we're aware of this tiny little piece, but our subconscious, our infraconscious, our like levels, we have 49 layers according to Jung. Yeah, 7 times 7 layers of subconscious and infraconsciousness. That's what's driving us, especially our motor, instinctive, sexual, because it's super unconscious what drives that. All right. So we got to remember, we don't know ourselves. That's why all the Delphi, the Oracle of Delphi, know thyself, know thyself. We don't know. We're just kind of in this very mechanistic way of moving through the world, being aware of just this tiny piece. We're conscious like this level. And what's driving, like what we're truly filled with, are these little nasties that are just, look at how everybody suffers so much. If our self, being our God self, our divinity within us, was a little bit higher, we wouldn't have this kind of suffering, you know? So it's definitely directly correlates the amount of psychological aggregates or psychological defects that are controlling the ship, be it individual or collective, determines how much we're suffering as an individual or a collective. And you look out at the collective, and right now what's driving this ship is not good stuff because it's hurting us. And divinity doesn't hurt. Yeah. So the idea in Gnosis is that right now, most people on the planet, we're at 3% consciousness, 3%, you can call it consciousness, innermost, beingness. What did you call it earlier? Chispa divina, divine spark, whatever you want. It's all the same thing. It's the spark that comes from the Ein Sof Or, the limitless light, and it comes down and it comes and it incarnates in this body for this lifetime to do this work in the material realm. Okay, so we have that in us. We have this divine beingness inside of us. But right now, it's completely, that's like 3% of who we are, and the 97% of who we are these things that cause us suffering that we don't even realize. They're so deep in us. It's very deep. So that's the process, is just coming to awareness, just figuring out, oh my gosh, like, who is making this thought happen in my head? Is that God? Is that love, generosity, altruism, kindness? You know, is that the attributes of divinity, or is that the attributes of demons? I mean, really, like, people like, you shouldn't use the word demons because some people, it's like this old Christian word or whatever, but it's like, it's what they are. Okay? Hell isn't some place that we go to.
I think it's very much hell is here.
Hell is right here. Hell is right here. It's our psychological aggregates. So when we say ourselves, and this is a lot of the issue around the New Age movement, that came from beautiful teachings, like the original teachings that were brought out by Steiner and Blavatsky and Alice Bailey, Vera Stanley Alder, a bunch of teachers, the turn of the century, 1900s, brought out these same teachings that Samael teaches, they're all the same, okay? But what happens is once they get brought out into the materialistic world, they get published into books and then turned into organizations and schools and whatever, they get corrupted. It's just what happens. When the mystical comes into the material, it just gets corrupted. It's just how it happens. So now we have the New Age movement that moved out of those, that is the corrupted version that came from the teachings being brought out 100 and what year are we, 24? Like, yeah, 100 and some years ago, right? And so what we want to realize is, like, a lot of where we talk about self-love, that's a big one, like learning to love ourselves. It's like, yes, very important. But what aspect of yourself are you learning to love? Because there's a place where, okay, we got to love the orcs, or we got to love the psychological aggregates on one level, because we don't want to hate them or be angry by them, because that's just them. So it's like, you can't just, you get in this cycle. But at the same time, you don't want to indulge them. You don't want to be like, oh, I just have an addiction to potato chips, and I'm just going to learn to love that aspect of myself. Okay, that's gluttony. And that's me. Real life example. And that is hurting me. That's causing me suffering. Okay, so we don't want to be like, I just, I'm just this kind of person where, I look at others and I get a little jealous or envious. And then that's what motivates me to do better for myself. It's like, no, like, you don't want to love that aspect of yourself that is there. That's envy. That hurts you. That hurts those around you. Okay, so it's really important that we get that we have 3 different levels of our psychology, of who we are as an individual human in this lifetime. We have our personality and our body. Temporary. It's like this big. It's here for this lifetime, and then it goes. I'm never going to be Winn Mallard again. I'm never going to have this body again. It's super short, super temporary, and it's here for our GPS machine. It's here to guide us through this trajectory. Yeah. We in this materialistic culture focus totally on the body and personality, just like it's everything. And it's hardly a thing. Okay. Then we have our ego, or our psychological aggregates. Here's, terminology. Some people say ego equates it with pride, but really how the teachings talk about ego is it's all of these psychological aggregates: fear, jealousy, envy, hate, anger. All of them are our ego. And that comes with us lifetime to lifetime. Like, it follows us. If I had lots of pride in my last life, it comes with me into this life, because that's what I'm supposed to be working on. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. Yeah. And then we have our consciousness. We have the divinity within us. So we have 3 selves. We have 3 aspects of ourself. So we have to understand that. It's very important in terms of learning what it is when we say myself. And that's what all the mystical teachings are about. Know thyself. Okay? And the aspect of you that is the universe, that is the gods and goddesses, it's in there. Just right now, very quiet. It's like Horton Hears a Who, the Dr. Seuss, the Dr. Seuss book, where the big elephant is like hearing this tiny little voice from the Who in Whoville on this little clover flower fluff.
I never to read it.
Okay. All right. Well, for those of you who know Horton Hears a Who, it's basically the genius of Dr. Seuss talking about what it is to listen to our consciousness. It's a very quiet voice right now because it's surrounded and encaged by our unconscious, our subconscious, our infraconscious. And all of that is yucky stuff that we brought with us lifetime to lifetime. And so but that's who we want guiding the ship. We want the divinity in us guiding our ship. We want, of course, you're going to know best. You're going to know way better than Winn Mallard how to be with people, how to be compassion, how to be love. Like, that's where it all comes from. So we have to like really get that sense of like, oh yeah, okay. When I think of self, who I am, the self I want to love is that little tiny voice in there. The mythology, David and Goliath. David is that sweet little divine spark within us, and Goliath is all the psychological aggregates, giant monster, that this tiny little thing. But faith, direct connect, experience is what helps us get there.
I think my last question is, why do you think it is that way? Why do you think we need to come down all the way and then work our way up? Why is it so hard? Why do we have to work our way up? Why do we have to take this journey?
Because the scriptures talk about that God or divinity wanted to know itself at a different level, right? So God created us in her image kind of idea so that divinity could know itself at this other level. So send an aspect. Divinity goes, okay, let me send a piece of myself down into this other world to where it's then separate from me. It's then submerged in this physical form, this physical realm, and let me see how it grows itself from that place of being. So it's kind of this like idea that that's a level of reflection for divinity to know itself, because that's the point of, even for gods and goddesses, for archangels, angels, elementals, know thyself. It's just kind of, I think the design came about for that reason, for even divinity wants to know itself, you know? That would be that's what I would throw out at the moment. But I'm sure there's lots of reasons. I mean, there's ideas that the reason this humanity is at the level of suffering that it is right now, because there was a goof. We messed up. So we're off course. That actually the work is harder and stronger and more potent for this humanity than really divinity designed it to be. But there is a major goof along the way, and so we're just having to deal with that right now.
And learn from it as well.
Exactly. What do we do with mistakes? Yeah.
There's no such thing. They're just lessons.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you, Laura. It's been wonderful to be with you. Yeah.
Like
bright blessings always on your journey.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. To those of you who are interested to learn more about Winnie's work, I'm going to leave all the links in the show notes. And I invite you to subscribe to the podcast, to leave a comment with any questions, with any doubts, or maybe any arguments that you might want to put forward in the comment section. And as always, I'm Laura Sagan, your host of On Emergence, a podcast on what it takes to be a human being.